What was it like to do Genesis Joe in a prison? That afterwards, I remember telling a good friend of mine. I said, he's a pastor. I remember telling him that this might have been the most rewarding ministry experience I've ever been part of in my life, ever. And I've been involved in a lot of different ministries. And hands down, this is definitely top 3. We did Genesis Joe at the jail, and when we started out, we did it in a like the gymnasium of the cafeteria, not cafeteria, but it's like a basketball court, and these guys come in and they got tattoos and they had their jumpsuits on, and they sat down and they were like looking at me like, what's this? What is this guy? I mean, they looked hard. They were like, they were not won over at all. They were just looking like. And I started into Joe, the play, and I'll never forget it. When I got to the part where Joseph gets put in prison by Potiphar, Joseph comes up. He walks up to the edge of the stage. There was no stage on this basketball court, but I walked close to where the guys were, and I remember looking at them as Joseph, and I said, the last place I ever expected to find myself would be here, and I paused, and I went, in prison. When I said that, there were guys like 3 rows back. They were like this guy. I guess some of them didn't know the story of Joe. Maybe some of them have heard it, but some of them, I know some of them hadn't. And those guys in the like all the guys, everybody there, when I said in prison, then they went, moved to the edge of their seat, and they started listening. Even the guards that were over on the side, the guards were over. They were by themselves, just watching. They weren't really paying attention, from what I could see. When I said, I found myself in prison, now the guards turned their heads, and the guards were paying attention. Everybody, you could have heard a pin drop from that point on. And they paid attention throughout the play, but from that point on, the Lord started really working on these guys. Maybe he was working on them the whole time. But from my perspective, that was a point where I was like, whoa, something had changed. And we did that the whole performance out. And it ends on a really high note, on a positive note. You know the story of Genesis. If you don't, go read it or come to one of the performances. And I believe either 11 or 13 guys made a decision that day to give their life to the Lord and to turn it over to him. And they got saved that day. I remember doing the last song, which is an upbeat, up-tempo type of song. And I remember looking up as I'm at the keyboard. And it was one of the most incredible things. These guys, they weren't just sitting there. There were guys standing like this, praising God on the last song. Amen. They were clapping their hands and praising God. And a couple guys had like tears coming out their eyes. And there was a move of the Spirit of God that day. And it was, we couldn't have any cameras in there, so you have to take my word for it. But it was hands down one of the most incredible ministry experiences I've ever been part of. Because to see these guys change, to go from being like this to praising God because of the story of Joseph and what he had suffered, it was incredible. You can't buy that with anything. The MasterCard's got nothing on that.